When you really want to dramatically change your life, it's your mind, your body, and your spirit. And you got to fall in love with yourself, who you really have been being, and the totality of that, not the parts that look good on Instagram and Facebook.
A switch point moment is a moment in time that fundamentally changes your life because of a connection you made with another human being. My name is Sean P. Neal, and this is the Switch Point Project. And hey, everybody, thanks so much for joining me. I hope you are having an amazing day so far. And I really hope that you heard what was just said. You have to fall in love with yourself, not the parts that look good on Instagram and Facebook. Because that's really a great summary of what we're talking about today with my guest, Shereeta Lacy. Now, Shereeta is a certified functional medicine coach. She's a functional health expert and a natural nutritionist and a health advocate. She's helping people build and maintain optimal health. And this is who she is. She's an amazingly driven person as well. And as always, one of the things that I really enjoy about doing the Switch Point Project is that I get to, have that opportunity to get inside someone's mind and find out what drives them, what inspires them. And we're going to do that today with Shereeta. So, as always, please stick around for a few words from our sponsors. And then after that, we'll be right back with this great interview with Shereeta Lacy. All right, and welcome, Shereeta Lacy. Thanks so much for joining me today.
For sure.
I am fascinated to talk with you a little bit about your journey because you're in the, what we're going to say is functional medicine. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But obviously, most of us, there's kind of a journey to where we started and then we get to that place where we find some healing and whatnot. Tell me a little bit about your journey in health. I know that as we were talking earlier, you referred a little bit to having children at a young age and some things you weren't really aware of back then. So take me back. You were how old when you had, first of all, how many kids do you have?
I have 4 children. I was 19 when I had my first son, Keenan. And then when I had Kylan. I was 23 when I had Kai, and then I was 35 when I had Khalid. So they have an 11-year age gap between Kai and Khalid.
There's the myth of, I think, what the ideal pregnancy is going to look like and how you're going to feel and what kind of, and then there's the reality that pregnancy really changes your body. And it says so, the man in the room, obviously, but there's, the reality that it changes your chemistry. I mean, women find themselves facing diabetes during pregnancy, all kinds of things. What were some of the struggles that you encountered either during the pregnancy or as you continue to grow and after you had the children?
So the experience for me was more emotional. And then later on, I learned about emotional toxicity. And they were hormonal also, and they were also nutritional. I just didn't know that at the time. I didn't learn that until I got in the functional medicine space, the impact of all of the stress, the hormonal toxicity, and the emotional toxicity. But it all linked back to stress and being very stressed out.
Yeah, tell me what, I'm sorry to interrupt you, tell me a little bit about what emotional toxicity looks like, and not just what it looks like, but what did it look like for you? What was that experience like?
The emotional toxicity for me was anger, was resentment, and that was the way that I handled things. So I would literally rehearse the anger, whoever I was on it with, and then I would put on my armor of anger and then go out in the world. So I'd have this very gregarious personality out there. But oh my God, don't be a fly on the wall in the house. It'd be like, poor kids. But it was, and the impact of that, later on, we got an opportunity to do great work together, me and my children, my mother. And it wasn't about it being my mother's fault. It was just life. There was lifestyle choices that I made there were no fault of my family, certainly. They were just choices that I made at that time. And the impact on me from expectations, who I would think people would be in your life, the relationship doesn't work out, so you and the father of the children are not together. Just, it was the impact of all of those things. And they were rooted in disappointment, rooted in fear, rooted in anger, and rooted in resentment.
Was there a specific moment where you kind of went, this isn't who I feel I am, and I know that there's more that I need to do? Like, was there a tipping point for you?
Mm-hmm. When I got pregnant with my daughter, her father insisted we were going to have a girl. And I had 2 boys at this point. And I just realized that I was repeating what I saw my mother do. Like everything that I was doing up to that point in my life, whether it was the choices in relationships, whether it was my decisions about money, I was just literally repeating the things I watched my mother do. And then I realized that I wouldn't want that for my daughter. I wouldn't want her to see me behaving in that manner. I wouldn't want her to do those things. It's the funny thing about kids, because what you learn as they get older, they don't have to see you doing them to repeat them. But that she was the catalyst for my initial introspection and my desire to change. And I remember literally being in my apartment one day and saying to myself, everybody has the same 20. I think I had just learned that Bill Gates was making like $1 million an hour. And I literally was like, everybody has the same 24 hours a day. Why am I not rich? Why are they able to do this and I'm not doing X, Y, and Z? And it was still a lot of journey left, but that was that initial, that was when it began. It was like, I'm having a daughter now, and I really wanted it to be, I wanted to model what I wanted for my daughter that I felt like I didn't have.
It's a tough place to be, because when you look at the fact that in order to come to that place, you have to set your ego aside, because your ego, my ego, our ego wants us to be right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that mirror like for you? How did you come to terms with, this is who I am, but this is not where I want to be?
So what had happened was, once I had my daughter, and then I was parenting, those 3 years. And by the time she was 2, she was about 2, so not quite 3 years yet. But when she was 2, I met a group of people who are now called the KI Echo Center. And the man's name was Imhotep Adisa, and the woman was Paulette Fair. Those were the 2 primary people. And there were other people, and I had gotten into an organization by that time. I was very empowered. But Imhotep was the one that had the environment where I really got to grow. And he was the first person through a company that he called Scarabus, which still exists. And he literally took these young people, and I didn't even know that I had those kinds of skills. And when we would come to work, we spent a lot of time in book study. And it was this one book in particular. It was all of them. Like, we read Good to Great. We read Built to Last. I mean, we read the good ones. And here I was, 26, 25, wow. 26 years old. I'm in this book study. And he has us read a book by a man named Peter Senge called The Fifth Discipline. And that book was about how corporations could be learning organizations, right? And how we examined mental models and archetypes. And they would show you how it showed up in practical business, but it really hit home for me. I was able to see, this is where, an archetype. Oh, that's what that is. That's where I got that. And when we would cover the chapter on mental models, it was like, that's where I got that. And so we would be in book study, and I would start crying. I would just start crying. I was so confronted with who I had been being, and I could really, really see myself in the work. And I knew that I could do more, I could have more, and I could be more where my kids were concerned, especially. And there was a woman named Dana Wright, and she was with an organization called Beyond Your Best. At that time, that's what it was called. Today, it's called Zarvos Coaching and Leadership Training or something like that. And she gave this pamphlet to Paulette Fair. And Paulette Fair said, girl, they sure know how to get that money, don't they? And she handed me that brochure, and I said, I want to go to that. She was like, oh, if I had $500 to spend, I would have to put it into the organization. And I was like, I want to do this. And I start working with this company called Beyond Your Best, and it dramatically changed my life. That was, and you talk about being confronted with the mirror. That was when it really, so it was between being at Scarabus, working with Imhotep in the turnaround consultancy, and then that work, those transformational courses were like the work of the book. So if the Peter Senge book, The Fifth Discipline, was the book, then working with Jim Zarvos was like doing the work to unearth everything that was not really you, that you had come to do to survive. You know, it's all the stuff you start doing to survive. And that was when I really saw the mirror and went to work to really transform my life.
Yeah, you're driven. And I see so many of us who, you know, we create these goals and we create and we go on the self-improvement journey, and the commitment piece of it becomes difficult to stay with it, to last through the journey. What is it in you that's driving you to be able to stay in that journey?
What had me stick with it when I didn't want to was my children. I just did not want to continue to show up that way. And, you know, you can apologize for being a particular way with your children, and it just gets to the point that they're just kind of like, okay, Mom, yeah, we forgive you, yeah. But it was like, and then I did Landmark, you know, years later. I got into Landmark education, and that was like, if Abraham Hicks had a workshop, it would be Landmark. It would be Landmark over and over and over. So the times that, and then I was really committed to my family. But most importantly, it was the commitment to my children and who I wanted to be for them. And then I felt, you know, I have a Christian background. So I felt that I had a commitment. It was the commitment to the community outside of myself. It was like, I was so into my meditation and prayer in my young 20s that it was like, okay, I had a vision of what this legacy was supposed to look like. And it was, what kind of world was I leaving behind for my kids, so that if I wasn't here anymore, what was the contribution that I was making to the world? So the days that I didn't want to do it, it was like, I can't not do my part that makes a difference in the world, even if it is standing for transformation where women are concerned, children are concerned, poor people are concerned, to make the world, to be the change that I wanted to experience in the world. And so the days I didn't want to do it for myself, I had these other people, my community at large, that my children were living in, that said, no, you got to stay in this. You got to keep doing this. You got to keep transforming your life. And every time that challenge would come, to react and respond differently to circumstances, then there was that challenge, you know, because that's when the transformation really shows up, right?
Sure.
It's not when things are going good. It's when you're in breakdown and then you're desperate for that breakthrough. Yes. And that will get your commitment up. You when you have something greater than yourself that you are in it for, then the commitment's easier.
So as we start to kind of bring that full circle, then you've got a lot of things that you've obviously been doing in the self-improvement category. And that obviously can go from emotional to well-being and health and things like that. I want to talk a little bit about the functional medicine, functional diagnostic medicine specifically, and how that relates to all of this, how that became part of your journey.
So the functional medicine became a part of my journey because I had already been writing what I call the womb process for over 10 years. And the funding climate was not right. They were just then starting to talk about trauma. And this was in the earlier 2000s, but they weren't dealing with it, right? And so because we were living it, then we knew there had to be like, how were you going to help somebody to have the mindset to improve their life? So if I'm poor and I have kids and I've been living in public housing and I'm on welfare, going to Impact to learn how to dress for an interview, that wasn't going to cut it. It was like, I got to have the mindset. And then when I was living in Phoenix, I met this wonderful person named Gary Brisker. And Gary is the one that let me know. He was a master degree nutritionist, and he wrote a book called Mindset. And when I read that book, I realized that there was a huge piece of this that was nutritional, and I added it to the womb process, but I didn't exactly have the competency. When I came back to Indianapolis and I met Dr. Santisi and I started learning about functional medicine, I was like, this is it. This is it. This is how a person can, this is how we can deal with the whole person. And so it was the addition of that nutritional competency to the rest of the process that we put together inside of the not-for-profit. And I call it a process of holistic transformation, because it wasn't just enough to do neuroemotional technique, which I did with my corrective care chiropractor. It wasn't just enough to do yoga. It wasn't just enough to do landmark. It wasn't just enough to eat right. It needed to be all of those things together in a facilitated process so a person had a safe space. And so when I got into functional medicine, that's when I learned about the root cause of chronic disease. And because I had done yoga, then when Nikki brought in the yoga for 12-step recovery, that's when I learned about the underlying, how trauma undergirds addiction, whether it's chemical addiction or process addiction. So if you are addicted to anger, addicted to sex, addicted to relationships, debt, the hustle, your brain looks like the person that has the gambling addiction, or the person that has the alcohol addiction or the crack addiction. Your brain literally looks the same. And when I learned that, and then I began to see in functional medicine how the food also plays a role in that, and the food addiction and what's in it, or the food products rather, then I was able to get a clearer picture of how adding this kind of nutritional competency in functional medicine was really going to make a big difference in the whole process for holistic transformation.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because as you start to talk about functional medicine, you're actually talking about I think the words on the website are integration, not separation. And so bringing all of those things together, what has been your greatest success? Like, what have you been able to do personally by bringing this concept into your life?
Well, oh gosh. So when I first met Dr. Santisi, I had just been to the doctor because I had these fatty tissue lipomas. One was protruding out of my arm, and I had them on either side of my spine, and my back used to feel like it was on fire all the time. And so we have a comprehensive health history questionnaire that we give to people when they start with us. And then we move on to what we call a blood chemistry test. And what we get back from the lab is called a functional health report. So when I gone to my doctor, and this is through no fault of the doctor, because we are creating relationships where we work with the doctor. It's never anti-doctor, anti-prescription. If you have a horrible infection, you need the antibiotic. My dad had a heart attack a few weeks ago. God forbid I'm in there trying to do functional medicine on my dad when he had a heart attack. I needed him to be with the doctor. But my doctor could only see what she could see. And she could only see my blood work in the standard range, right? So she could only see that my cholesterol looked a little bit 3 points high, and my protein was a little up 3 points high. But when I got the functional health report, that's where we could see that I was actually pre-diabetic. I had a candida overgrowth in my gut. I had leaky gut. I had hyperthyroid. I had my skin used to itch terribly. I was always tired, always. And my doctor just didn't have any solution for that. And so here I was with decent blood work according to my doctor, but terrible chronic fatigue. So once I got the functional health report, boom, we could see it. Adrenal fatigue was the problem. My body was storing the iron. So I had anemia, but not just iron deficiency anemia. It wasn't because my body was deficient in the iron. It's because my body was storing the iron. But I didn't have any B vitamins, which we really call cofactors. And so because I was so nutrient deficient in the B vitamins, I didn't have that engine carrying the iron to the bloodstream. And then the conversion wasn't happening in the liver. So my liver was congested. So personally for me, I was able to get a specific protocol to help with my kidney support, to help detoxify my liver, to help heal my gut. And I did an elimination diet based on my blood type until I got a food inflammation test, which is a food sensitivities test. And then I could see specifically what foods were causing a problem where my DNA was concerned. And so once I went on that journey with Dr. Santisi, it was 3 weeks. Literally, it was 3 weeks. I had lost 12 pounds. And when I did the protocol after I started the elimination diet, I never knew what it felt like to feel good. And I remember when I called him the first time and I was like, oh my God, oh my God. My skin wasn't itching. I woke up like I actually rested for probably the first time in over 20 years. I got rest. I woke up refreshed. I wasn't having migraines. I wasn't having acid reflux anymore, which had been a huge problem for me since I was 27, 28. And so those were the personal successes for me. And I immediately did the program with my mother. I took 18 pounds off my mom. I got my mother down to an extra strength Tylenol for pain and off of the other heavy narcotic things that they had been giving my mother for prescriptions for many years. And my mother says the same thing. She didn't even know that she could feel that good. She hadn't felt that good ever in over 40 years. So it was the impact that I was beginning to be able to make for other people outside of just myself, so that they could feel good and they could begin to get real answers. Taking 75 points off of somebody's bad cholesterol in 30 days makes a huge difference for them when their pain clears up and all of those kinds of different things. Helping people to lose weight. That was huge, to have a coaching call and somebody say, I lost 29 pounds, and they haven't successfully been able to lose weight prior to that point.
What do you value most about yourself as a human being?
Probably just my commitment to others and to create possibilities for them in spaces where a lot of people that, a young brown woman wouldn't have been. When I was going to Beyond Your Best, I was the only black person, let alone black woman. I've never been afraid to go into spaces and places where I may be the only one. But I know that as we roll out this concept more and more and more, and we have a greater offering to it, to the public and the community at large, that it's because I was willing. I've just always been willing. That's probably the thing that I love the most about myself. I'm always willing to say yes, and I'm always willing to keep going. And one of the biggest things that I got out of my personal transformation journey was when circumstances no longer dictated my happiness. When I was able to be happy despite the circumstances, that's when I really feel like, oh, now I got the juice. I got the juice. And I just think it was my commitment to the world I wanted to create, and my stand for other people is probably the thing that I love most about myself.
Sure. And when you think about legacy, when you think about, the bigger picture, what is it that you want to leave behind? What's important to you in this earthly journey?
For me, what's important is ultimately, we can talk about the mechanics of it, but what it basically boils down to is freedom. The greatest thing I watched the documentary once called 2 Million Minutes. And even though like the American kids were getting our behinds whooped by the Asian kids and the Indian kids when it came to a lot of the academic standing, the one thing that American young people had over everybody else was self-confidence. We are born into a conversation about being free. And every person knows that if you are experiencing an area in America where you don't feel free, I have the right. This is my God-given right to be free. And when we look back on our collective ancestors in this country, there is too many people that gave their life for us to live inside of what we call freedom. And so that, for me, the legacy is about real freedom. But it isn't just freedom like, I have the right to be here. I have the right to go to school. I have the right. It's like, no, in your mind. Like, there are people that I know that are in prison that are freer than people who are not. So it is the real freedom in your body, mind, and spirit, not just like the laws, but like being fully self-expressed, being free to be. It's facilitating the process that frees people up, delivering a process of holistic transformation that ultimately is about how people can create possibilities for their life and how they get to experience freedom. But, and there's all kinds of specific legal things and international human rights laws and all these other kinds of things that I'm involved in, and being a human rights defender, that I have a whole world of all of that going on. But the sum total of why I participate in those things, it is about people's individual freedom to be and being a fully expressed, feeling left satisfied and in love with the life that you've created for yourself on your own terms.
When you think about a woman who is trying to get her voice out in the world, much like, you have throughout your life building up to where you are now, what's some good advice that you would give her?
It's a lot of work, and it depends on where you're starting. That's easier for some people to reach than others. I have an ability to relate to all kinds of women because of my upbringing, growing up in Phoenix in the 80s when there was like very little people of color. There were moments that I experienced being the only Black person in my whole school, not just my class, my
Wow.
school. And
Wow.
so my ability to relate to women is not limited to Black women, but it is when it comes to relating to women that have children that have reared them in poverty, or relating to the woman that has multiple, what we call the baby daddy, or a bad marriage. If you have lost the father of your child, because I know what that's like to bury a co-parent. I know what it's like to lose a co-parent to the penitentiary. And so I relate to women on all different kinds of levels, depending on where they are. So my message would be, when you really want to dramatically change your life, it's your mind, your body, and your spirit. It is not about just chasing a bag. I hear this a lot amongst young girls, and I'm chasing the bag, I'm getting the bag. But the real magic is when you pull it to you. When you pull it to you. And so that message for that woman would be to really get to know who you are. Like, really. And that is going to come from chipping away everything that you're not. And one of the things that I find that is missing in these conversations is about the being. People get into these conversations about transformation, and it's always about what they're doing. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And of course, we got to be in action, but it's really the being. What do your relationships look like with people in your life? What is your relationship like with your family? What is your relationships like with your kids? It's your personal relationships. You want to know where you are on your transformation? Look no further than your relationships with others. Ask them. Ask your children, what do they think about you? How do they relate to you? Ask your husband, how do you see me? How do you experience me? That's where really, when you start getting into who you've been being. And when you go to work on who you've been being, and you got to start digging up that real stuff, those automatic triggers, and you start to get into the science of the way it works. And I'll just give you a quick example. When I was in yoga for 12-step recovery and getting that certification, it was like, oh, so my nervous system, I get addicted to these hormones that get released by my nervous system, and that all leads into my subconscious, and my subconscious wants a safe space. And so, because I think I can separate myself and decompartmentalize the pieces that I don't like about myself, you have to allow all of it. You got to love all of it, even the parts of the traumatizing things that have happened to you. And when those negative internal thinking come, you got to tell yourself, I love you. I love you. Look at yourself naked in the mirror. Catherine Clift had me do that for a long time. I love you. I love you. And you got to fall in love with yourself, who you really have been being, and the totality of that. Not the parts that look good on Instagram and Facebook and kind of the
Yes.
avatar that we create behind the wigs and the makeup. But, go behind the personality, as Nikki would say in yoga classes. And because yoga has become such a trendy thing too, and I love to see it, but get into the sutras, get into the Bhagavad Gita, get into the philosophy behind the practice. It is not exercise. It really does. It is it's a vehicle for transformation that goes to work on the being. And that's what I would say. Get in touch with your being, and then get to the doing and the having.
I love it. All right. So Healthy Response Solutions is the company. What is a good way for people to find out more about what you do and to connect with you?
They can go to healthyresponsesolutions.com. There's no funny spelling. It's just healthyresponsesolutions.com. You can see my story there. I have little videos like this with interviews about myself, how I got started in my journey.
Shereeta, thank you so much for spending some time with us, letting us have the pleasure of getting to know you a little bit. And I definitely look forward to connecting again really, really soon. All right.
Anytime, Sean. Thank you so much. And I really, really appreciate the opportunity to share with you today.
The Switchpoint Project is part of the Switchpoint Media Network. Switchpoint Media creates raw and revealing conversations that explore the intersection of self and social awareness, growth, and authentic human connection. For more great podcasts and videocasts, be sure to join us at switchpoint.media.